Perfect. Okay, so for those who have joined in the last couple of minutes, again, just a quick introduction. So welcome to this webinar on bullying and harassment. My name is Jessica Canero. I'm a therapist, holistic therapist, hypnotherapist, regression therapist, and coach at Illuminations Wellness Center in Dubai. So it's absolutely my greatest pleasure to be here today. As I have told Mona, and I would really love to take the opportunity to share with all of you, bullying and harassment and the topic and the work to help and to educate people about bullying and harassment is one of my greatest joys and pleasures. It's very close to my heart. I have seen and dealt with many bullying cases in my career. I have been to schools, I have spoken about bullying in corporate settings, and it's a topic that really needs to be spoken about so much more. So to be here, to be able to spread this knowledge with all of you and have this opportunity to share it is such an honor for me. So thank you so much for all being here. I really hope that this is helpful for you. I really hope that this gives you a lot to think about, a lot to reflect on, and will change the way that you see this whole experience and this whole topic. So this will be a PowerPoint presentation that I will be using for most of the time that we have together. As mentioned previously, I would hope most of you or all of you would have a pen and paper on you. If you don't have, or you just don't have it as of now, that's okay. But these exercises that I will be asking you to do or just to reflect on will just be for your benefits. As I said, there's no pressure to share. Last thing I just want to mention before we begin, interaction. So this is a workshop. I always like to think of things as a workshop rather than a webinar. And the reason why is because workshop implies interaction. So I love when people speak to me. I love when people utilize the chat. I love when people ask questions. And like I said, there will be exercises in which I will just blatantly ask the group and say, okay, guys, what do you think this is? Or what do you think this could be? Or what type of bullying do you think this could be? And I would love your input. Okay, there's absolutely no right and wrong here. There's only just experience and thoughts and opinions, and all of that is always welcome. Okay, so please always feel free. If you don't feel comfortable turning on your mic and speaking up, you are always welcome to write in the chat. If there is any concern regarding technical difficulties, if I zone out for whatever reason or I keep talking but the sound is gone, please feel free again to switch on the mic and just say, Jessica, something's wrong or we can't hear you. Okay. All right. And of course, if there are any questions, so parts of this will be exercises, parts of this will be theory and information that I'm going to give you. If at any point though, during the information part where I am just giving information and showing you slides, if there's any concern or any question, you can absolutely write in the chat. Or if you prefer, I will give time at the end for any questions that need answering. So let's begin. I'm going to share the screen and we shall start. Okay. Now, bear with me, guys. I'm not the most technical person when it comes to slideshows. So if there's any little tweak that I need to do, I'll quickly do it. So do forgive me if anything comes up. Okay. So today, as mentioned, we are looking at bullying and harassment. One moment, let me just move this over here. So the reason why the first thing that I wanted to give in the title is awareness is key. As a therapist and as somebody that dives deep into mental health, the first thing I always believe is that in order to change anything, we need awareness. So we need to know exactly what we're dealing with and what we're talking about. So many cases when it comes to bullying and when it comes to harassment, people understand it as a term, but they don't necessarily know how to see it from a distance, what it may look like in an unusual setting, how to see it in your day-to-day. So often we go to kind of what we know from experience or what we see in cinema, or what we know of from people that have told us. But sometimes it can be very difficult to pick up the smallest details of these things and actually be aware of where it happens, when it happens, and who it can happen to. So I always say that the first thing is about being aware. Once we are aware, everything can change, and that's the beauty of any work. So awareness is key. This is exactly what we're going to focus on. A deeper look into bullying and harassment and what we can do to change it. Okay, so power is always within us. First thing is about understanding it, becoming aware to it, and then we move right into how can we change it and how can we create a safe and beautiful atmosphere, not just for students, but not just in schools, of course, but in workplaces and in life in general, because this can happen anywhere. It's not just in schools, it's not just in educational facilities. So, okay. Defining bullying. Now, I'm going to go in and give you a little brief definition of bullying, and then we're going to do a very brief activity. So first thing is defining bullying. Bullying is defined as unwanted, unsanctioned behavior amongst people. Unsanctioned meaning that it's not called for, it's not asked for. It involves a real or imagined power balance. Now, what does that mean? That means that in reality, it can be, so as an example, if there is someone who is a boss, who is bullying somebody who is an employee, there is an actual power balance there, or let's say a power, not even a power struggle, but like there's a difference in power because somebody is an employer and somebody is an employee. So by rank, one is lower than the other in terms of work. In other cases, it may be employee to employee. So neither one, they both have the same power balance, yet one puts themselves above the other. So this can be imagined, this can be someone's belief that they are bigger than somebody else, or it can actually be a case where the actual power balance is quite substantial, or the power difference is quite substantial. So the behavior is repeated or has the potential to be repeated over time. So in some cases, that's not to say that a one-off is not defined as bullying. It can be as well. But what we see in terms of definition is that bullying tends to be repeated. So it tends to be consistent. Bullying behavior is not justified by its characteristics, but by its impact. So as an example, aggressive behavior is often considered to be bullying. So when people think of bullying, they tend to think of physical bullying, physical behavior. But that does not imply that passive behavior is not. Now, this is a very important point because in many cases, our mind is programmed to contrast things. So if we see an aggressive case of bullying, so a case of violence or a case of physicality, then we might see two people talking or two people whispering to each other and think that's not bullying because that's the opposite of what I have experienced as somebody who may have witnessed bullying in their life. Now, this is not the case. So this is very important that there's no characteristic of what a bully, for lack of a better word, would do or what may look like or how they might act. So bullying can be something that is very small and almost very almost borderline invisible, can be very hard to detect. On the other hand, bullying can be something that is very much present. It's physical, it's very easy to spot, right? So it can be sometimes quite hidden and sometimes it can be very much in the open. Bullying behavior is not always easily identifiable, as I just said. So in bullying behavior, we look for an imbalance of power. Okay, so people who bully use their power, such as physical strength. So this is another example of like a real power significance there, where somebody is physically bigger than somebody else. Someone may be older or taller, etc., etc. Or access to information or popularity. So this is an imagined power difference where, because maybe you're more popular than a person, or perhaps you feel that your position is higher for whatever reason, that we can consider an imbalance as well. Or popularity, so illusion of hierarchy, I'm bigger than you, I'm more important than you, to control or to hurt others. And the second is repetition, as mentioned. So bullying behaviors usually happen more than once or have the potential to happen more than once. So it may have only happened once, but if there's a need or there's an observation that it can potentially be happening more than once, then that's also something that we need to notice and to be on the lookout for. Now, before we continue with the next slide, I am just going to stop share for a moment. Now, I am going to now present to the screen some cards of some examples. Now, we all may, in our minds, we all may have different perceptions of what bullying is. We may have experienced it ourselves, okay? And this is a very safe environment to share if you wish to. We may have experienced it ourselves. We may have seen our best friends or our relatives go through it, or we may just have known about it from somebody else, or we may have seen it elsewhere. Doesn't matter. So we may all have perceptions. Maybe for some of us, We think of bullying, we think of aggression, we think of physicality. For others, we think of bullying, we think of gossiping because it's something that has directly inferred to us or something that has happened to us. Okay, so this is just again for your perception and for your thinking. I'm going to share some cards. And as I do, I just want you to think in your mind through each card whether you would identify this as bullying and what kind of bullying you would identify it as. Okay, now this is just for you to keep in your mind. We're going to discuss this a bit further on. Okay, so I'm going to go card by card. First card, harassment. Second card, causing drama. Conflict. Spreading rumors. Demeaning others. Practical jokes. Posing a threat. Terrorizing others. Flirting. Teasing. Sarcasm. Making a threat. Hitting. Hate speech. Intimidation. Isolation. Name calling. Or picking on. Picking on others, being picked on. So have a think about these, and if there's any that came to your mind that maybe you didn't think were bullying, or maybe even till today you think, oh, I don't know if that's actually bullying or not, we'll come to it. Keep it in the back of your mind. So we'll go back to the PowerPoint now. One moment. Okay. So just defined bullying. Now let's define harassment, because it is slightly different. Now, first thing to know about harassment is that harassment is considered the umbrella term, and bullying actually falls under harassment. So when we are looking at it from a legal sense, from a worldwide sense, bullying is often associated as something that happens in schools, which is of course not the case, but stereotypically that's what people perceive when they hear bullying. So harassment is more of a terminology that is used in the workforce, used older, used in social settings, etc. But they are very much linked and very much connected. So in a legal sense, if a matter were to go to a court, it would most often be deemed that bullying would be put under the umbrella of harassment. And obviously harassment, there are legal implications for that. In a workplace environment, harassment is more commonly used term and has legal ramifications, as I mentioned. Harassment is defined as unwanted conduct that violates people's dignity or creates an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment. Although the two terms are often interchanged or confused for one another, research identifies two main valid differences, and these are, number one, a person who is guilty of harassment will often use individual differences as a means of victimizing others, and the goal is to weaken or possess the recipient. This recipient is the person that is on the receiving end. I don't like to use the word victim, and I will explain that later on. I don't like to use labels. So a person who is guilty of harassment, this is their intention. Now, what does this actually mean? Essentially, a person who is guilty of harassment is actually very much focused on the recipient or on the target that they are looking to demean. Now, why this is the case is that harassment through research has shown that there tends to be something called protected characteristics, which are motivations for people to harass others. Now, these protected characteristics we're going to deal with on the next slide. These are things like age, gender, orientation, etc., etc. But in many cases, people that are guilty of harassment are actually looking and focusing very much on the target. So there is a specific reason why they are attacking a specific person, and it is something about that person. A person who is guilty of bullying others will use humiliation and scare-based tactics as a means to embarrass or shame them. And the goal is to take control and or status from the recipient by overpowering them. Now, this essentially means that person who is bullying, that tends to be focused on, so it tends to happen in a wider space. Bullying tends to happen in front of others in social settings. And what is actually seen as different here is that the bully is focused on empowering and making themselves look bigger than the person that they're targeting. So for a bully, their focus is actually themselves. So they will target someone who they perceive as potentially weaker or easier to overpower because it will help them to feel bigger and more powerful and stronger. So the bully is, or the bullying behavior is more focused on the bully and what they are going to receive from demeaning or making someone else small, as opposed to harassment, which is about a specific target for a specific reason. So that's why with bullying, it can be more random. If you, in cases where people have spoken to those that have been accused of bullying, they've actually said that there's no particular issue with this person other than the fact that they're very quiet, or than the fact that they feel they're easy to overpower. It's almost like a game of power for them, while harassment is very targeted. So technically wise, harassment can be more severe because there is actually a certain characteristic of a person that is being targeted, which is obviously very dangerous. Both, of course, are very detrimental, and that's why they're essentially under the same umbrella. So very similar, but slight differences. Now, as mentioned about protected characteristics, we're going to do a quick activity after I go through this. So in the Equality Act in 2010, this is from the UK, under the identification of harassment, there are 10 primary characteristics which have been identified as protected characteristics. These are characteristics in which there is shown to be significant harassment and discrimination in the workforce and education facilities. So these are race, color, religion or creed, national origin or ancestry, sex, including gender, pregnancy, sexual orientation, gender identity, etc., age, physical or mental disability, veteran status, meaning those that have fought in wars or etc., genetic information, and citizenship. Whoops, sorry. So these are the main protected characteristics which have been noticed and monitored through research. These are the main characteristics when we are dealing with harassment that are motivating people to harass others. So if there's this discrimination against someone's race, this will motivate them to harass the other person. If there's a discrimination against their color or against their age or against their physical or mental disability, this promotes for them or creates a reason for them to harass another person. This is not found as much in bullying, but this is found very much in harassment. So, actually, before we do that, so this activity that I would like you to do, this is where I would like you to get a pen and a paper, please. Now, I have just gone through and shown you those cards, which I've given you some specific examples of what potentially harassment, bullying can be or how it can show. Now, with these protective characteristics that you have in front of you, just take 2 minutes and I would like you to write a paragraph of an example of bullying or harassment which would be started or motivated by one of these protected characteristics. Now, it can be an experience that you have had personally. It can be something that you have seen, that you have been a witness to. Maybe you've seen someone be bullied because of one of these characteristics, or if you have been fortunate enough not to have either in your life, then that's great. In which case, just create a scenario. So be creative and come up with a scenario where someone that is a recipient, someone who is receiving any kind of bullying or harassment has through one of these protective characteristics. So just come up with a story. But as I said, if it can be something that's real to you, an example that you've seen or experienced yourself, that's more beneficial, of course, or more effective. So 2 paragraphs at max, just explain what happened, why they were bullied, surrounding or circling around one of these particular protected characteristics. And just keep it on the paper. We're not going to share it. It's going to be part of an exercise that I'm going to bring you back to later on. As you're doing that, I'll just check the chat. If there's any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, in 2 minutes, I will ask you just to stop and we will continue with the presentation. Okay, so just wrap it up if you haven't already, 10 more seconds, and then we will get back into PowerPoint. So just keep it to the side, we will come back to it. Okay. All right, now this is an exercise where I would love everybody's input, okay? So if you are happy to do so, please take your mics off mute and just shout out the answers to me if anybody knows, and we'll move ahead with this. So, common myths about bullying, because I love to always start with the myths. This is the first way to debunk anything that is perceived as fact but is actually completely opposite to fact. So let's start. Bullying occurs only in schools. True or false?
False.
False.
False. Excellent. False. Why? Bullying can occur just about anywhere. It is common in schools and workplaces, of course, but it can also occur in homes, at parties, in parks, or anywhere where the recipient is present. Correct. Thank you. Next one. Bullying only happens between enemies. True or false?
False.
False.
False. Absolutely. Bullying can be observed within friendships, family, and within loving relationships. This can happen completely without the awareness of the person who is on the receiving end of this behavior. This is due to the fact that bullying can often be misconstrued for discipline, tough love, and honesty. Now, please understand with that last statement that there, of course, is very pure and prime examples of discipline, tough love, and honesty. This is in very specific cases where the two are misconstrued for one another, but it actually is identified as bullying. And there are cases and research to indicate this, but obviously that's not always the case. Bullying always happens as a result of someone else's negligence, e.g., parents and teachers should be able to tell if their student or child is being bullied. So if a parent or teacher doesn't notice, is that why bullying occurs? True or false?
False.
False.
False. False. Bullying behavior can be very underhanded and not easily identified, whether that is by a teacher, a parent, a sibling, or a friend. If you are able to observe an act of bullying or harassment, you are always encouraged to report it or intervene only if you have the tools to do so. And of course, if it is safe. Under no circumstances do we blame or accuse others of negligence for not noticing when bullying has happened. Bullying is a rite of passage. This is my favorite one. True or false? Rite of passage means that it's common in life, like children need to go through it, so it's character building, it helps people to become strong, this and that.
False.
False? Anyone say true? Good. Someone was going to say true?
Yeah, I do, because I feel like it depends on the person, you know, like it can make you stronger.
Absolutely. So this is actually something I mentioned in this answer. Can bullying make you stronger? Yes. I'll read this answer and then I'll get back to you shortly. So bullying is a social disease. We say false to this because we say it's a social disease. It's not character building in everyone's case. For some people, they use it as leverage to build their character and become stronger, but that does not happen with everybody. It is not kids being kids or people just being people. Its consequences and effects on others is measurable for years afterwards. Well-researched prevention and intervention methods have had a hugely effective result in the well-being of those that have been targeted, no matter what the age. So like many experiences, and this is where I'm just going to relate back to what you mentioned, like many experiences, difficult ones can and often do strengthen us. That's true, and teach us valuable lessons, but this does not justify it as a mandatory life experience. So while, yes, it can be positive leverage, meaning that people can use their experience of being bullied as a way to become stronger, to deal with people, to work better in conflicts, that still does not mandate it as something that all children should go through to be able to achieve the same result, because research has shown us that while some children do use it efficiently, for others, it can actually have the complete opposite effect and do let's say, can cause a lot of issues later on in their life. So not always does it turn out to be the lessons from bullying, not always does it turn out to be a positive experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Next one. Bullies are often boys. Sorry, boys. And you can tell who is a bully by looking at them. True or false?
Absolutely false.
False.
Absolutely false. I love that answer. False. Bullying is never gender specific. People who bully rarely fit the stereotype of the muscle-bound, hot-tempered, mean kid across town. Sometimes people who are smaller in stature will actually bully to compensate for size. The same theory covers the spectrum across all attributes. So it doesn't matter, somebody can be smarter and use that as a reason to bully, etc., etc. Okay, so absolutely, this is completely false. Never is it gender specific. You can always tell the one who is bullying from the one who is bullied. This is a little tough. True or false?
False.
Anyone else?
True, I think.
True? Okay, I'll show you the answer and then I'll explain. False. I should have put some true ones in here, actually, thinking back. But anyway, in many cases, bullying and harassment can be interchangeable and it's not black and white. Someone who may be excluded from others one day may be verbally abusing their colleague or friend the next day. The blurring of roles can often be attributed to overcompensation or as a defense mechanism to protect themselves. So when somebody has been bullied for a long period of time, it has been noticed in many cases that after a certain period of time, they turn and actually start to bully others as a way to cope with the feelings of inadequacy that they have dealt with from being bullied before. And sometimes it can happen within days. So one day they're being bullied, the next day they're bullying. So it's never a black and white situation. It can absolutely change day to day, depending on how people handle that. If they're bullied, will depend on how they project it onto others. So we always need to be cautious of that. That is a tough one. Okay, so now another little quiz, and well done for those that answered. Thank you very much for participating in that. So this one's a little easier. Let's go through the different types of bullying. So quiz time. Which form of bullying is this from the picture?
Cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying. Excellent. We're going to go through these in detail. Which form of bullying is this?
Verbal.
Excellent. Verbal. Which form of bullying is this? This one's tough.
Gossiping.
Could be taken as gossiping. Not quite though. This one is emotional bullying or social bullying, sometimes it's called. What type of bullying is this? Again, a tough one.
This is the kind of bullying that is physical, maybe? Stronger people. Huh?
Can be.
Jokes.
Yes. So practical jokes falls into this category. This is called hazing. So I'm going to go through with you a lot of people actually haven't heard of this term, but it is a form of bullying, a more modern terminology, but we're going to go through it very shortly. Okay. All right. This one's easy. What form of bullying is this?
Physical.
Physical. Excellent. Okay. Now, cyberbullying. Let's start with this one. All right, so cyberbullying, it's a form of bullying that takes place over digital services like cell phones, computers, and tablets. Cyberbullying can occur through SMS, through text and apps, or online in social media, in forums or gaming where people can view, participate, or share content. Cyberbullying can include sending, posting, sharing negative, harmful, false, or mean content about someone else. It can also include sharing personal and private information that causes humiliation and embarrassment. Some cyberbullying crosses the line into unlawful or criminal behavior. The most common places where cyberbullying occurs: social media, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, text messaging services, instant messaging, direct messaging, online chatting, online forums, chat rooms, and message boards such as Reddit and these sorts of things. And of course, email and online gaming communities. So we're going to focus a little bit on each, but then I'm going to go back to verbal bullying because that's our main focus for today. Verbal bullying, just a brief overview. Verbal bullying is defined as the act of saying or writing mean or hurtful things. Words are powerful. I think we all know this in theory, but sometimes we don't realize just how much. Words are very powerful. When it comes to bullying, sometimes verbal bullying can result in deeper long-term wounds than physical bullying can. So verbal bullying can include teasing, name-calling, demeaning, inappropriate comments, taunting, and threatening to cause harm. Emotional bullying. Again, this one can often be misconstrued for different types of bullying. So we'll just explain what this one looks like. Emotional bullying makes use of situations, actions, or words that cause fear, shame, guilt, sadness, and embarrassment to a person. It can be harder to identify as it is seen as an act of coercion many times, so an act of sort of drawing people in. And it can be a combination of other bullying types. So other bullying types can kind of merge into emotional bullying. Emotional bullying can be name call, teasing, mocking, using sarcasm, threatening, putting down or belittling someone, ignoring or excluding from a group, especially excluding from a group, lying, tormenting, tricking others, ganging up on others, and humiliating others. So this is essentially what covers emotional bullying. Manipulation as well. Hazing, for those who maybe haven't heard of it before, or maybe you understand it from a different terminology or different name. So hazing is essentially the type of bullying that we understand when people join something like a cult, you know? It's a case of when someone joins or refers to an activity expected of someone joining a group, okay? So in order to maintain status in that group or to maintain exclusivity in that group, oftentimes there will be requests that are asked of them, things that they are required to go through that they may not feel comfortable with, but they feel they have to in order to stay in the groups. There's a lot of manipulation that happens with hazing. In years past, hazing practices were typically considered harmless pranks, comical antics. Today, there is a broad spectrum of what is hazing. So the more publicized version is normally the more severe, which involves forced consumption of alcohol, servitude, or physical cruelty. On the other end of the spectrum would be the requirement of simple tasks to gain favor from other members. So they may send you to do certain things that you're not comfortable with, but you feel as though you have to remain a part of this group. As we know, as sociable beings, there is an innate desire to be part of a community. So hazing can be very detrimental in that it's quite sneaky. It works on a basic need that we have to be wanted and feel like we belong to a group. So the requirements can take priority over all other aspects of your life, including schoolwork, friends, family, and relationships. You are sworn to secrecy about all aspects of the group. This doesn't always happen, but in many cases it does, including your requirement and the activities that you do. This can result in being afraid or worried of what will happen if you do not complete the requirements. So that's hazing in a nutshell. Physical bullying, pretty self-explanatory. Physical bullying is deliberately aggressive or violent behavior by one person towards another that may result in bodily injury. Physical bullying may involve actions such as punching, kicking, biting, choking, burning, shaking, beating, which may at times be severe enough to cause permanent damage. Outside of school, it can be most frequently observed in relationships of trust, going back to how bullying is not always happening between enemies, particularly between parents and children or between partners. Individuals who experience physical bullying often feel helpless and isolated and are prone to the subsequent developments of numerous pathological conditions. So it's a breeding ground for pathological conditions that can follow, such as depression, eating disorders, post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and substance abuse. So this is very important to keep an eye on that. Many cases, people that suffer from these experiences or these disorders tend to go back to physical abuse or physical bullying when they were younger, either in school or in family or in social situations. Not always the case, but in many cases. Gossiping. Often people don't think this is bullying, which I find very interesting. It's a gray area, this one, but it is still considered to be part of bullying. So initiating conversations or reports, this is what gossiping is, initiating conversations or reports about other people's private lives that may be unkind, disapproving, or not true. So sometimes it may be actually something that is not intended to be nasty, but just the fact that it's not true and the spread of that information of someone's private life is considered to be a bullying act. Gossip can be considered any talk about someone who isn't present. So if you are talking about someone who is not present, that is conducive of gossiping. It is usually about something we can make a moral judgment about, meaning that you tend to approve of the information or disapprove. So as an example, Jessica didn't turn up for her test yesterday, and I think that's just terrible, you know? So it's something that we feel we have an opinion on, and that's why we gossip. And it's entertaining, meaning it doesn't feel like work to do it, and you tend to want to share or hear this information. Now, just as an interesting tidbit, gossiping actually goes back to primitive ages, where gossiping was something that if we understood what was happening between tribal families, then we would be able to understand any threats and survival tactics. So it actually goes back to a very primitive psychological requirements, right, to remain in a social setting. So it's interesting how gossip has developed over the course of civilization, but we're very cautious of it now only because we have seen the ramifications of gossip and how it actually can destroy a person's character and reputation, even when the intention may be good. So scenario activity. Okay, so now we're going to do another small activity where I'd love you guys to intervene, speak to me, say whatever you think it'll be. I'm going to give some examples and we're going to just guess and see what type of bullying it is now that we've gone through all the bullying types. So David Knight was oblivious to a website that was created all about him. For months, there had been a website that made fun of David and his family. They said things along the lines of that he was weak and stupid and that his family was poor and dirty. The website invited others to actively be involved with bashing this boy. Along with the website, people were sending him hateful emails telling him how much they don't like him. What kind of bullying is this?
Cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying.
Well done. Number 2. Amanda was invited to be a part of a new and exclusive division at her work. After a few months, she was told she needed to wear fitter, nicer clothes to represent their exclusivity and importance among their peers. Amanda was not earning a lot of money and informed them that she could not afford to buy the same brand of clothes they were buying. One day she arrived at work and one of the group members sneered, so that means they made fun of her choice of clothes, and tore at her skirt to shorten it, threatening that if she would ever be excluded from the division if it ever happened again. Amanda was humiliated but went to the shopping center that evening to buy an outfit that they would approve of, using the same money that she needed to pay her rent that month. What kind of bullying is this?
Hazing. Emotional.
So I got 2 answers here, and both of you technically are right. This is more hazing, but this can definitely move into emotional bullying as well. Yes, this is actually a true story. This happened back in my hometown. And yes, it was considered, in the end, it was considered a hazing example of bullying. But yes, it can actually be termed for emotional bullying as well because there's a lot of manipulation happening here. Okay. Nisha was distraught when her mother passed away. At university, a classmate, Jody, had heard that Nisha's mother passed away due to her struggles with being severely overweight. Intrigued, Jody entered her classroom and shared with her teacher the information that she had heard. Soon it was spread around the class in an open discussion with comments made about Nisha's relationship with her mother, as well as her parents' divorce years before, and the supposed toxic family dynamic. What kind of bullying is this?
Gossiping.
Gossiping. Excellent. Ryan is an autistic 13-year-old who is a quiet boy despite being occasionally teased by his siblings. Like any boy, he had that one crush. This girl that he had his eye on had stuck up for him for a while, but soon became the main bully. She pretended to like him and then made fun of him and said in front of her friends and his that she would never like a guy like him. His siblings began to taunt him after that, calling him names like loser and delusional at the dinner table and laughing at him. What kind of bullying is this?
Emotional.
Can be emotional as well. It's particularly with the girl, but yes, verbal in the end, that the siblings were the ones that taunted him, and very aware as well that in many cases it can be siblings, it can be friends, even when it's perceived as a joke. Okay, last one, I think. Melissa is part of a friendship group at school which consists of her and 3 of her closest friends. She arrives to school one day to find that her friends are not where they normally sit to wait for her. Now she sees them on the other side of the school assembly, sitting and talking as normal. She goes up to them only to find that they all give her strange looks. They do not make space for her and refuse to talk to her more than a few words. After she inquires on what the problem is, they ignore her. She finds that in classrooms, at lunch, and after school, everyone in the group stops calling her, including her in social events, and making space for her. She has no idea what she's done wrong. What kind of bullying is this?
Emotional.
Excellent. Emotional bullying, because on this particular case, using tactics, excluding her and manipulating and not actually explaining what she's done wrong, if she's done anything wrong. So this would be considered emotional bullying. Now, let's look a little deeper into power, the victimization of difference. So power balance and this understanding, what does it mean to be different, and why is different often ending up or seen as victim? Okay. So this goes back a little bit into human psychology and primitive ages, yeah? And I really do believe this is great to understand. It's really good for context of why people bully and how it actually goes back in our nature as human beings. So in order to drastically reduce and someday eradicate bullying, we must understand it as a defense mechanism that traces back to primitive times. Victimization of difference. Now in tribes, so many years ago in the Homo Deus ages, when we were tribal existence, a tribal civilization, those that were deemed unfit, born with any defect, or held attributes that could potentially endanger the survival of the group were removed. At this time, removal or exclusion often guaranteed death, and that member would be at the mercy of the weather, starvation, dehydration, wild animals, and other natural threats. This is why, as a recipient of bullying or harassment, it can trigger our fight or flight mechanism, and I'm going to go into this shortly, our desire to run or to fight, as our mind interprets this as a fight for survival. So back then, inclusion means life. If you are included in your community, because your community together would fight natural threats, if you were included in your community and you were a valued member of that community, you would live, or your chances of living were much greater. The minute that you became excluded, it would mean that your chances of dying were much higher. So back then, everything was life or death. Inclusion meant life, exclusion meant death. Now, in social settings, those that were weaker or considered potentially to have some kind of problem or concern, physical issue, that means that they couldn't keep up with the group or that they weren't strong enough to maintain the social setting, often found through research that they were actually removed from the group. They were pushed out, they were isolated, and they were forced to go on their own, because the fear of the collective group or the collective tribe was that this particular member could weaken all of us. And that could put all of our lives in danger. So in order to save the majority of us, that person has to go. Now this, of course, back then, there was no sense of discrimination against that person. It was simply a case of, are you going to help us survive, or are you going to be a liability to us? If you're a liability to us, then you are removed. Now, this was just the case, again, of going into life or death. Now, interestingly, we have become a very civilized race now. We are very civilized. And the reality is that we are not faced with life or death dangers anymore. But we have a subconscious mind. And this mind is programmed to remain in that space of life or death, threat or safety. And this is why in many situations that we see, many psychological issues or concerns that we notice, we actually tend to find patterns that go back to the subconscious's need to keep us safe. So whatever is deemed a threat can often feel like it's a threat on our life, even though it's not. So this is why in many cases, as written in the last paragraph, when we are feeling bullied, or especially when we are feeling isolated, you will see that people can't cope with this. They start to get panic attacks. They feel that it's the end of the world. They struggle. They get anxiety. Why? Because this is that fight or flight mechanism that kicks in from all the way back then, saying if you are about to be, you're only being excluded from a social group, it's not going to kill you. That's the reality. But back then, this would have been death. Now it's just simply, it's a social shunning, you know, it's like, okay, well, you're on your own. But back then, on your own was a big problem. So the mind still stays in that primitive age, despite the fact that we have actually become civilized. So what we don't know creates fear. Fear implores us to isolate for the sake of safety. So if we don't know if this is going to be a threat to us, biologically and intrinsically, we tend to distance ourselves from it. Now, this is where awareness comes in, because we need to understand now, and we need to train our mind to understand that we are no longer in these primitive stages where we are in constant life or death dangers. So competition of resources, or of the alpha male stance. We all know about the alpha male, beta female, you know, these people that were in power that kind of ran these tribes, meant that demonstration of power was necessary to remain a figure of leadership in the tribe. So those that would lead the tribes, those that would go out and hunt, those that would be considered the strongest, were the ones that were constantly fighting for proof of that power, to showcase that I'm powerful. And we still see this in animals today, right? There's a leader of a tribe, of a pack. And usually in many cases, whether it's the lion or the wolf, these animals tend to have this ideology. And in many cases, the alpha male is the one that has fought his way to the top. So proven himself to have that power and that leadership skill. So leadership and respect ensured survival. If you were strong and you could prove that you were strong, excuse me, and the way to prove this is, of course, is to fight the weakest person that you know, or the weakest member that you know. That ensured that you were in the top ranks, which means your chances of survival is greater. Combat rituals would be performed to determine the stronger or the most capable to lead the group and produce offspring. So of course, in many cases, in tribal spaces and with animals as well, the alpha male would be the one that gets his choice of female. So which with to mate, to make sure that the offspring is strong enough to carry on, to grow up, and to hopefully, of course, take over the tribal group or the tribal social setting. So this was all a very strategic, primitively planned existence. There was no emotional discrimination behind it. It was just how things were. So as mentioned, to produce offspring, with the weaker specimen being isolated or removed from the group. So once again, the weaker male, let's say, or the weaker specimen would be excluded. That male would not reach that level of leadership. That male would not most likely be chosen, or it wouldn't be produced in terms of offspring, or the offspring would be considered weak. In many cases, they would die because they would be ostracized from the group. So these animalistic instincts were very prominent in us in those primitive ages. But as I said, what we need to understand is those instincts actually still do remain in us today. We have grown civilized, we have grown aware, but that doesn't mean that those experiences still remain at that subconscious level. Now, I'm going to go a little deeper into this soon. So going back on fear, we all fear what we don't understand, right? Human condition, fortunately or unfortunately. What we don't know instills fear in us, which is a social conditioning based upon a biological and primitive response. What is deemed unknowable is deemed a threat by the subconscious mind. So if I don't know what this is, I know it's a threat. That's all I know. Any subconscious threat is a threat to survival. Now, I'm going to go in a little bit into the subconscious mind here. So for those of you who aren't aware, we all know that we have a mind. Mind is like, if we consider a computer analogy, the mind is like the software, the brain is like the hardware. So they're not the same thing. The mind is what keeps the body functioning like a computer does. And the software are the programs that keep it running, that keep the mechanisms running. Now, in the human mind, we have two parts. We have conscious mind, we have subconscious. This is a very common diagram that people use all around the world, the diagram of the iceberg. And the reason why is because obviously how much of the conscious mind as opposed to how much of the subconscious mind is very prominent. So what we can understand of our mind is just 10%, which is that tiny amount that is above the water. Subconsciously, there is so much more going on, and subconsciously, or the subconscious, is worth 90% of our mind. So a lot of what we experience in our lives, our programs, what unconsciously rules our behavior is in the subconscious. But because we aren't aware of it, it is an unconscious process that it guides us. And many times we don't, it's just a thought process or an automated process we don't even think about. Now, the subconscious mind has two purposes, let's say. Number one is to store all memories, including primitive ones. Now, these are what we call biological responses, primitive memories that are ingrained within us as human beings, as mammals, as animals, right? Second is its responsibility or its purpose is to keep us alive. And this is very important. So the subconscious mind does not judge. It does not understand good from bad. That is a very conscious process. Subconscious only understands that what I know is what is safe. And what I don't know is unsafe. And what is unsafe can kill me. So I will always choose what's safe. Now, but I think that's just going to come up here. Yeah. So what is known is safe, which means what is known is good. What is unknown is unsafe, meaning what is unknown is bad. Now, consciously, is this true? Of course not. So as an example, where this conflicts is when we are dealing with personal growth, right? We all want to grow as people, morality, spirituality. We want to explore. We want to have adventure. We want to learn about ourselves and do things that we haven't done before to grow character, right? But subconsciously, this is very difficult and very difficult for the subconscious to accept, because all of these experiences and these desires to grow and learn, the subconscious blocks or tries to block, because there is an attempt to do something that is unsafe. Now, of course, realistically, it's not. You want to go and you want to, let's say, anything. You want to do like diving or anything like this, right? We know that this is not technically a life-threatening situation, but subconsciously you will feel that there is so much resistance to going and doing this. And many times you feel like running. What is this? This is actually your subconscious response, which is keeping you away because this is unknown. Even though you know this is not going to kill you, this is still unknown. The same applies in social settings, that it takes conscious effort to reach out and help people, conscious effort to include people, conscious effort to help those that potentially may be of need of our help, because in that primitive process, in many cases, we are designed to be social beings. We are designed to be with others that will help and, you know, maximize our survival, and to exclude those that could potentially be weaker or could be of less benefit or could be a threat to our survival. So this is where we need to come out of that space, understand it, respect it, as this is a part of our history and this is part of our primitive biological response, but we do not have to take it on and continue this behavior. We become conscious, we become aware, and we work to overcome this. Yeah. So now focusing on verbal bullying, since that's where we want to bring a little more of our focus today. Verbal bullying is when a person uses certain words, insults, nicknames, bad and disrespectful analogies to insult or undermine, hurt or embarrass another person. Verbal bullying can happen in person, it can happen on the phone, online, and is considered one of the most common types of bullying among students in the UAE. 22% of boys have claimed to experience verbal bullying. 16% of girls have claimed to experience verbal bullying. What are some examples? Teasing, threatening, putting someone down, using swear words, cruel criticism, repetitive phone calls, calling names, remarks, offensive jokes, sarcasm. This last one can often be quite difficult because some people can be very sarcastic in nature and not necessarily understand that this can be considered verbal bullying. So this is where we look at intention. Even though sometimes intention can be good, there still needs to be an awareness of, where am I crossing a line here? Where am I crossing a boundary? So now this video I'm about to show you very briefly is about bullying versus banter, okay? Very common question. People sometimes feel that they're the same. Sometimes people have a negative connotation of conflict, but actually bullying and conflict are, or verbal bullying rather, and conflict can share similar attributes at the beginning, but actually the resolution is very different. So let's just have a brief look at this video.
So how do I know if it's really bullying? Let's talk about the difference between normal conflict and bullying. Normal conflict happens occasionally between friends. With bullying, there's a pattern, and the process is repeated regularly. People don't normally plan on having a conflict. It just happens. Bullying isn't something that just happens. It's on purpose. In normal conflicts, both people are usually upset. Friends don't like to hurt each other's feelings. But with bullying, only the target feels upset in that situation. In a normal conflict, one person doesn't have all of the power. But with a bullying situation, one person tries to take all of the power or control. Normally, both friends will admit to a conflict. Bullies usually don't admit to what they're doing, and they often try to blame the target for the situation. Also, friends usually try to work out their problems. Bullies usually don't show any effort to work things out, often because they don't see a problem with what they're doing. For more information about the Shield Against Bullying program, visit shieldagainstbullying.com.
Okay, so let's go a little deeper into that video. What did we learn from this? Number one, how conflict is different from verbal bullying. So all parties have equal power to solve the problem. Okay, there's no sense of power imbalance here. All parties have equal power. All parties, whether that's two or more, have equal interest in a peaceful outcome. So the resolution, the desire for that resolution is there, and the desire for a peaceful resolution is there by everyone that's involved. It is not a repeated encounter. So like many cases, it happens once. Conflict happens amongst friends, amongst loved ones. It's natural, it's healthy, but it happens and then it's sorted. It does not continue. It is resolved by debating, talking, and mediation. Okay. Now, sometimes, of course, things can escalate. Sometimes people raise their voice, but the one thing that remains in this space always is respect. Respect in the conversation, respect in the topic matter, respect and awareness in what words are being used, so it never crosses that personal boundary. Obviously, if it's verbal bullying, it completely crosses that boundary. It goes into personal attacks, it goes into name calling, it goes into cussing, it goes into threats, it goes into insults, etc., etc. Okay, so just very important to remain aware of that. Now, verbal bullying. Probably one of the only types of bullying where it can happen, as mentioned before, it can happen and it can easily be lost on us if we have been involved in it. Now, not in all cases, but I have seen many cases where due to sarcasm, due to joking, due to just different understanding of language, verbal bullying occurs. Someone is very hurt, but the perpetrator does not understand or is completely unaware of where they've crossed the line. So just as a little self-reflective exercise now, I'm going to give you a very quick couple of questions, which I just want you to think about and ask yourself if this has ever applied to you. If maybe at any point you may have crossed that line into verbal bullying and perhaps not realized it, right? I think this is all really important just for us to be aware so that you know if in future, firstly, you identify it much easier, but also you see it in others. And you be aware of what little things can start off with verbal bullying, little seeds that can actually grow and become bigger problems. So take this moment now just as a self-reflective exercise and sense whether this is something that you've ever had in your experience, either that you've done or been done to you. So have you ever frequently called others names that they don't like? This includes nicknames. Now you can write the answer down or you can just think about it. Now this could be friends, siblings, cousins, anyone. Have you ever called someone else names that you know they don't like? Second question. Have you ever mocked people or made fun of people who you feel are different from you? Have you ever called others not so good or cuss words just because they differ from you in origin, ethnicity, or religion? Have you ever made fun of others because of how they appear, their clothes, or their outward appearance? Have you ever made fun of others because they may be different to you in terms of experience, life experience, or childhood experiences, like growing up differently? Culture. Have you ever engaged in or spread rumors about anyone else? Have you ever posted mean, even under the impression of being funny, comments on someone else's social media? So in cases that I've personally worked with, I've noticed that where this area turns gray is in a lot of these cases where we can often think, oh yeah, I have been sarcastic and I have put a little joke on someone's social media, but the intention was good. It's not bullying. I was just having a bit of fun. So this is where we need to reassess and understand that always intention, unfortunately, is not enough. Your intention can be because you know the person so well that you think it's just being funny. You can think that they get the joke. It's all right. I've said to them before, they get it, they laugh. But the reality is that the only way to know if it is crossing the line into bullying is to always ask the person. The person that is on the receiving end of the behavior is the only person that can tell you, yes, this hurt me, or no, it can't. It is not up to us to decide that my intention is good, so I'm not bullying. So in some cases, verbal bullying continues to occur even without the awareness of the perpetrator. The intention may not be to hurt, but the unfortunate consequence remains the same. It is always important to self-reflect at times, as we are all human and can displace our anger or helplessness. So just take a moment to check in with yourself. Again, we've done the quiz. So ultimately, the way to know if your behavior has crossed into bullying is to ask the person who has been on the receiving end of your behavior. We don't get to decide when we have hurt others. Intention is not enough. The most important stages of ending bullying is acknowledging and understanding. We'll go into this a little deeper. The anatomy of a bully. So why do they do it? Let's look into some examples, but first I'd love to hear from you guys. Just shout it out, your answers. Any thoughts? Why do you think people bully? Anyone at all?
For
Sometimes
some,
they
it's
feel
to
more
gain power.
superior.
I've heard gaining power. Yeah. Anyone else?
To feel superior to the other person or
Feel
try to
Yep.
To make themselves feel better about themselves.
Good one. Yes. Okay. So let's look at some examples. We understand. So what we often understand, many answers that come through with this question are they want to impress their friends or build a reputation. They enjoy the attention or reaction from others. They do it because others do it. So it's a fitting in. Again, going back to social inclusion, right? To be accepted by another group of peers or co-workers. So if other people hate this one person, if you join in on hating them too, then you are part of that group. So it can be a form of social pressure as well. But let's look a little deeper into this, shall we? What does it actually show? And what does psychological research tell us? After in-depth research and analysis, it shows that there are 4 main emotions that are at the core of individuals who bully and or harass others. The first is fear. A fear of being bullied themselves can result in other people, in those people bullying others. This fear can stem from an unsafe environment at home. Example, violence or threats in the house. Fears at home can overcompensate into the fight mechanism in a situation where the perpetrator has more control. So if you are very fearful of something that happens at home, there may be a natural response to feel like you have to be strong and you have to be brutal and you have to be prepared to fight at any time because there's no safety at home, there's no security at home. So you may come to school or to your workforce or to university prepared to be in that fight state, which means that If you can't gain control at home, you will try and gain it over another person. Now, this is not the case with everyone, but this is what research has shown in some examples. So fear is the first core emotion that we have understood is behind bullying. The second is helplessness. Data shows that those who bully are far more likely than average to have experienced a stressful or traumatic incident in the past 5 years. Examples include their parents or guardians splitting up, death of a relative, or the gaining of a little brother or sister. So it's not always a loss. In new and changing situations, helplessness occurs when control is lost. As a result of this, an attempt to regain control is utilized by attempting to control those that they feel they can control. So when there is no control at home, control is sought out elsewhere. So helplessness is the second. The third is anger, core emotion. Anger is a repression of emotion. Those that bully often have been bullied previously, not in all cases, but in many cases. 66% of people who admitted to bullying someone else have been male. This is also important to acknowledge. Now, this is not to put a sense on gender here. This is an experience that we look at, on a social level, on a social sense. So we need to take a minute and think about how men are raised in our culture. Now, we all have different cultures here, I'm sure. So think about your own particular culture and compare that to the way in which women are raised. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done here. In many cases, the moment a boy starts to show any sign of emotion, he's told to man up, to speak less, to do more. For girls, it is encouraged that they speak up about issues that affect them. And it's encouraged from a very young age. Support within their social circles is readily available. For men, it's discouraged and is often grounds for teasing. And so they start to respond with aggressive behaviors. Again, not all of them, these are in some cases, such as bullying, as a way of coping with the issues that affect them. Repression needs a healthy outlet. When we repress our emotions because we have not been taught how to express them, we need to express those emotions in some form. And if it is not done in a healthy way, it will be forced out in an unhealthy way. An unhealthy way can be bullying. So repression needs a healthy outlet to express. And without one, it can be displaced to others through aggression. So when we teach our children, boys and girls, that it is so important to express how you feel, no matter your gender, no matter your age, no matter where you come from, when we give everyone that freedom to express, then when they go through experiences when they're very young, there won't be that repression of anger, helplessness. It will all be expressed in a healthy manner, which will allow us to work and decrease the effects, not just the effects of bullying, but actually bullying happening in general. Less and less people will fall into that because they will know how to express their emotions freely and in a healthy manner. Important to note, it is not something men are born with, yeah? Again, this is not a gender stereotype. It is a learned behavior that is actively taught by society using dysfunctional gender norms and roles. We can change this today. And that's for every woman who has ever given birth to a boy and for girls as well. Teaching them equally the importance of expressing emotion, and especially when it is a distressing emotion, being able to express and talk without judgment. Now, the last one, shame. In order to mask how they actually feel about themselves, some people who bully focus attention on someone else. It becomes a distraction for them. I think one of you girls mentioned shame, like in order to bully, it takes away from how they feel about themselves. So they try to avoid any negative attention directed at them by deflecting, despite the fact that they may despise who they see in the mirror every day. Misery loves company. We've all heard that term before. Shame is a powerful and difficult emotion to feel. And often the most common way of coping is to initiate it in another so that it feels shared rather than an individual experience. If I feel ashamed, I'm going to make you feel ashamed too, because that makes me feel better. Okay? So again, this goes back to being taught how to express and deal with these emotions in a healthy manner. This is what prevents this from happening. So these are the 4 emotions that we find is at the core of bullying. Now, this is for those who may feel that they may have ever fallen into a moment where it could be considered bullying or a bullying act. Yeah. Know that you have taken a powerful first step in acknowledging your behavior. Okay. It takes courage. Well done. And this can be passed on to anyone that you may have known that may have potentially engaged in this behavior and not known, and years later, maybe looking for something to understand about this. Disassociate and remove the label of bully. Now, this goes back to what I said at the beginning. I don't like labels. I don't use them. This is a name that is based upon an action, and an action does not define who you are. So if I am dealing with somebody who is bullying, I will say you are showcasing bullying behavior, or the way you're acting is in a bullying way, but never to say you are a bully. And that's the same to go with a victim. Okay. We never say you are a victim to this situation. You are a victim of bullying. You are a recipient to bullying. You are someone who is taking the bullying behavior, or the bullying behavior is being directed at you. It can be a little harder sometimes to find the correct words, but it is worth it to avoid giving anyone a label. And this is especially important for children. The minute we start calling children, you're the bully, you're the victim, they take on this persona of bully and victim, and not just at school, but in their personal lives as well. So we never want that to happen. This goes back to words being very powerful. So please, at all costs, always avoid the term of bully, victim completely. Yeah. And describe the experience rather than labeling the action in a particular way. So once you remove the label, and this is of course working with the person who is the person who is on the receiving end of the bullying, not just the person who is bullying. Once you remove the label, the ability to change and heal is much simpler and much faster. So look at your responses to situations that stress you, anger you, or upset you. Think about new ways to respond that doesn't involve reactions against others. Educating yourself on the long-term consequences of bullying, not just for yourself, but for those who are on the receiving end. Ask yourself if you are willing to take responsibility for those things. I would say, everyone would say no. Know that there are safe places for you to go out and get help. And this is very important to direct this to someone who is bullying as well as someone who is receiving the bullying. In many cases, the person who is exhibiting the bullying behavior won't reach out because they feel that they are in that space of being the villain and they can't reach out for help because they will be judged. We need to open up that space to say that just as the person who is on the receiving end of the bullying has every resource available for them for help, so does the person who has exhibited that bullying behavior, because chances are they need help as well. Seek out those resources in friends, family, teachers, or those that you trust. People are always willing to help those who are willing to change. Okay. Oop, glitch there. Sorry about that. If it is your child, now this is more directed for parents, okay? Or if you have a niece, nephew, somebody else that you are aware of, this is more for you. If it is your child or a child you know, here's what to do. Encourage good behavior by highlighting their good traits. Positive reinforcement is always stronger and more impactful than negative discipline. Teach them friendship skills. Now, this is more for children, yeah? If you're concerned that your child is bullying others because he does not know how to make or maintain friendships, monitor them closely and determine which skills exactly they need to learn. Example, start a conversation, ask for permission, accept rejection. Make certain that the child has no aggressive friends. This is for adults as well. Be careful of who your social circle is. Direct them to turn away and look for friends that influence them positively. Find healthy ways to offload aggressive behavior, whether that is transmuting endless energy. So people often, aggressive behavior can come from constantly feeling like there's so much energy in the body and they have to get out and release that energy somewhere. So we don't want them to take it out on a person. So encourage them, boxing, swimming, yoga, anything that they can move the body. When we move the body, we release energy from the body. Teach your child the fundamentals of respect and empathy. So again, this is more related to children. We want to teach children these things very early on. Teach them about victimization of difference, how it is ingrained in us sometimes to act in a certain way, but we have to think beyond that, and how we have to consciously make the effort to embrace those that are different from us, and how rewarding it is when we do so. Be a good role model. Children constantly observe communication between adults. Children learn completely by imitation, not by what you tell them, and they learn by example. Consider child therapy as a safe space for the child where they can learn effective techniques and strategies on how to cope with underlying emotions that control this behavior. This is also for adults. There's no age restriction in terms of getting therapy. This can happen across the board at any time. Okay, another quick self-reflective task. Again, if you can write these down or you can just think of them, that's absolutely fine. But I'd like you to just think and answer these 4 questions. So either in your mind, on your computer, or on your notebook. The bystander effect, quiz and discussion. So what is a bystander? For those who don't know, have a guess. Just write it down or think of it in your mind. What is a bystander in context of bullying, of course? Do you think bystanders can be neutral when they see others being bullied? How do you feel when you see others being bullied? What would you normally do? And what are some effective actions bystanders can I can't say that sentence, sorry. What are some effective actions bystanders can do to stop or prevent bullying? So just give you a few moments. You can think about the answers or you can write them down. Okay. So if you need to if you didn't finish, you can just write down the question if you like, and you can come back to it. All right, let's go into what is a bystander. A bystander is simply a person who is present and aware at the time of the bullying, no matter the type or the whereabouts. This can also be included online. So bystanders can also be present in an online environment. There are 4 categories of bystander. These are, number 1 is the observer. They see a bullying situation, but they keep away and choose not to interfere. These are also people that you'll see on your phones recording, but they won't get involved. The rescuer, they intervene at 2 points: in the midst of the bullying to stop the behavior, or after the interaction subsides to provide emotional and psychological support to the recipient. The cheerleader, they often stand aside during the interaction, but will encourage the bully and laugh at the recipient. Now, I am using names here, which could technically be categorized as labels. This is not something to use out and about. This is just for an identification and an awareness that if you were to see this, you would say, okay, that's the person that's observing, that's the rescuer, yeah. Please don't use these if you're ever working with children or in a setting like this. The alias, they will intervene and join the bullying behavior. So this is the alias of the person who is bullying, yeah. So the observer, the person who stands back and watches, the rescuer that intervenes, the cheerleader that is more on the side of the person who is bullying, laughing, not really interacting, but just encouraging, and the alias, the sidekick potentially of the one who's bullying and who does actually get involved. Awareness is key. Going back to awareness, the bystander effect. So again, this is actually a psychological terminology. There's a psychological backing to this. The term bystander effect refers to the phenomenon in which the greater number of people present, the less likely people are to help a person in distress. When an emergency situation occurs, observers are more likely to take action if there are few or no other witnesses. Being part of a large crowd seems to unconsciously infer that no single person has to take responsibility for an action. So essentially, I'm going to tell you, I didn't end up putting a video. I couldn't find a video on this particular example, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So these researchers conducted an experiment where they brought a bunch of people into a room. The first bunch of people in a room were a very small number of people, about maybe 3 people, and they set off like a smoke machine in the room. So it looked like something in the room was on fire, right? Now, in the cases where there were less people, so in the cases where there was 3 people, 2 of the people intervened and tried to find the source of the fire and to let the experimenters know something was wrong. When there was 10 people in a room, which was in the second room, and the smoke went off, no one actually intervened. So in a situation where the smoke went off, everybody was sitting around because nobody wanted to take necessarily the responsibility. So everyone sits back and thinks that somebody else will do it. So this is the sense of the bystander effect. When we see something on the streets happening, if there's no one around, we feel more like we're the only one, so I have to intervene. But when there's a case of maybe hundreds of people around, we may see someone being bullied in front of us or something happening, but we release it, or we tend to walk right past it because we think that since there's more people, someone else will help. And in many cases, this person goes through the experience without no one intervening because everyone thinks the same way. So again, psychological response. The idea is when we are consciously aware of it, we realize this and we intervene no matter how many people there are. How can we overcome this? First and foremost, by being aware of it. Always awareness is key. If you find yourself in a situation, remind yourself that you have the potential to make a positive difference in this interaction, as people who are supported and comforted by their peers are far less affected than those who are left to defend themselves. How can you help? Prevention, which happens before the incident, intervention, which is during, and treatment, which is the aftermath. Please note, intervention is only acceptable. It is only if it is safe. Please, this is a very important point. It's not about encouraging people to intervene and be the rescuer in all these cases. In many, especially if it's a physical bullying incident, we don't want people just walking in and then potentially getting hurt. So it's always important to assess what is happening before you intervene. If it is unsafe, then it can be a case of going and getting somebody, you know, like a teacher or like a friend or somebody else that can actually come with you to intervene if you still feel the need to. But if at any point it feels life-threatening, please don't intervene. What prevention looks like. Observe if others have been left out. Okay, so this is preventing this from happening, right? As a bystander, how can we prevent bullying from occurring? Observe if others have been left out and invite them to participate with you in group activities. So this can be in social events, school, university, doesn't matter. Keep others involved. Ask open-ended questions. Notice if there are certain people that tend to be targeted. So if this is at a uni or in your social circle, notice if 1 or 2 people tend to be the ones that are always on the receiving end of this kind of behavior. Make the effort to sit with them or walk with them so that they are not directly exposed to those who may wish to target them. Show true authenticity by being a role model for your peers, demonstrating respect, compassion, and empathy towards others no matter what. Showing respect, compassion, and empathy towards others no matter of personal differences, or no matter what, same thing. Get to know people who think differently to you. This is really, really important and so rewarding. And immerse yourself in the learning experience. If you can, participate in non-for-profit or charity efforts and programs initiated by your school, university, work, or community to prevent the spread of bullying and harassment. Well, you guys are here. That's exactly what you're doing. So kudos to all of you and really proud of you to have you all here. Now, what intervention looks like. When it is safe to do so, diffuse the situation with humor or gentleness when it is safe. Please note that's the important part. Utilize your friendship groups and defend the recipient as a group. There is always a more powerful effect in greater numbers, and this is direct message to the perpetrator that the behavior is not accepted by the vast majority. So when they realize that their joke is not funny or their verbal bullying is not acceptable and no one's laughing at them and not encouraging them, they tend to back off. Do not be lured in by the bully to participate by saying no firmly and confidently. Express that what they are doing is wrong and intolerable. In cases of verbal bullying, change the subject. So if it can be a case of someone is saying something, it may not be someone pointing and like you've seen in the pictures, but a simple case where you can sense that someone is uncomfortable with what's being said around them. You can intervene in a very mild way by just changing the subject. That gives a very clear message to the person who is making the comment that this is not okay. Convey a clear message that your participation in this is not happening. And again, as always, if there's any concern in intervening or you're not sure of what to do, go and ask for help from a trusted parent, friend, co-worker, teacher, or counselor, depending on where you are, of course. What treatment looks like. Be present with the recipient and tell them that you are there to support them in any way that they need. Inform them that you acknowledge what they have been through. Acknowledgement is so important. So it's not about pretending like, oh, what just happened to you? Don't worry about it. It's nothing. This is not helpful for people in these cases. We need to acknowledge and say, I can see how hurt you are. I can see how much pain this has given you. And I'm so sorry this has happened. But I acknowledge that you are struggling or that you are crying or that you are dealing with this right now. Acknowledge what they're experiencing. Yeah. And that they don't have to explain themselves to you or anyone else. This is very important. In many cases, people come up to someone who is on the receiving end of bullying and say, what happened? Tell me about it. You know, what did they say to you? How did you feel? This and that, the other. And it's too much. Sometimes people internalize their experience, and that's okay. So it's a matter of taking the pressure off them. They may just want to sit there and have you next to them and not have to talk and say, this is what was said to me. Or so we free them from that by saying, I'm just here to support you. I'm a presence. I'm here if you need me. You don't have to say anything to me. You don't have to explain. Yeah. Some people internalize their experience, and that is okay. And lastly, again, report the bullying to the appropriate person who will action an appropriate response for this behavior. Personal reflection exercise. Okay. This is the second last one, so not long to go. Now that you understood a little bit more about the reasons for bullying behavior and you know what the bystander effect is, just go back to that bullying incident that you wrote about at the beginning. So the bullying incident that I mentioned to you, which is either something you've experienced, you've seen in others, or a creative scenario based upon those characteristics. Now, I'd like you just to take 3 minutes. I'll check the clock. Connect back with this experience and take a few moments now to write what you would do if you were observing this behavior. Okay, how would you act differently? What would you do or say? What would you want to do differently if you encountered a different situation? Sorry, if you encountered a similar situation rather in future. So thinking of this scenario, if this is something you have experienced personally, then move into the space of bystander and think of what would you have liked someone else to have done for you in that experience. If this is something you were a bystander to, you were watching, think about what you would have done, what you would have liked to do, and now with this awareness, what you would have done differently. And if this is a creative experience, think about if you were the bystander or you walked past and saw this happening, what would you do now? So 3 minutes, and then we will move on. Okay. All right. You can just finish up the sentence that you're writing. You can always come back to this as well in your free time. Now, when it's happening to you. All right. So, as I said at the beginning, this is a safe space. For those of you who have experienced bullying, this part is for you. Please know that this is always a safe space, and please know that I'm always available to be reached afterwards if need be. Okay? The emotions that we feel. If you have ever been bullied, you may know that there can be a flurry of emotions running through you at high speed, both during the experience and long after it. Whatever you are feeling is entirely normal. I want to reiterate this very strongly. Whatever you feel is entirely normal. There is no go-to of how someone should be feeling after they have been bullied or during bullying or at any point in the experience. Whatever you are feeling is entirely normal and completely okay for you. Emotions that we may feel, these are primary emotions that you may see in others or you may have experienced yourself. Depression or depressed feeling, anxious feeling, isolated, withdrawn, humiliated, low, upset, angry. Sorry about this, just got a block to my screen, or frustrated. Okay. Now, there can be many more, but from what we understand and when we work with people that have gone through bullying, these are the main emotions that are being felt as again through all the stages, when it first starts, as it continues, and towards the end of it. What can you do? First things first, yeah? Firstly, know that you are not alone. Most important thing, you are never alone with this. And secondly, know that there is help out there. There is always someone that can help you. Now, as someone who is a therapist, I want to reiterate something as well. You may find that you go to someone and it's not really helping, or you're not connecting to that person, or you're finding that it's not really helping in your healing process. Please find somebody else. Yeah, that's perfectly okay. Not everyone is equipped to be able to help you with what you're going through. So trying different people is always acceptable and understandable, but always know that there's someone out there that is going to be a perfect help to you, that is going to be able to help you through anything that you're going through, and that there's so much help out there, so many resources, so many people that are willing to stand by you, so much that you can utilize. So you are never alone, and there's always help out there. How to interact with someone who is bullying you. These are external techniques, okay? Firstly, now I'm going into bare minimum, obviously, because today is a webinar and it's a learning, but there are far more techniques that can be found in many resources, and I'm going to send or put up on the screen these websites shortly. So number one, especially if this experience is just starting or it's very new to you, talk to them, yeah? So this is more towards people that may engage in like verbal bullying and may not be aware of what they're doing or how much they're actually hurting you. Talk to them, bring a friend with you if need be. Tell them that their behavior is unacceptable, and if it continues, you will have to escalate it by letting others know. If they continue to speak badly to you, simply repeat, "I no longer accept this," and remove yourself from the situation. People who bully lose their motivation when there is no response to their behavior. Now, this happens in 99% of cases. The minute you stop reacting to what a bully is saying, they lose all sense of motivation. Because if they're not affecting you, then what's the point? So detach yourself from your emotions as much as possible. Please note this is during the encounter. This is not afterwards. It's very important that you express your emotions at all times. This is specific to in the moment with someone who is bullying you. Detach from your reactions. Remain calm. Focus on your breathing and where you are headed to next. So if you're walking somewhere or you're about to do something, focus on what you're actually headed to do. Interestingly enough, and this is not about necessarily being friendly, but this is about the psychology of bullying behavior. People that are in the throes of bullying behavior, they're the ones that are actually exhibiting the behavior. They completely get thrown off by people who smile at them, because then it shows them that whatever you're saying, whatever they're saying, you're not taking seriously and it's not affecting you, which is a huge not like a metaphorical slap in the face for them, because that's not the reaction they're expecting, and that throws them off their game. So smile at them if you can. It throws their power play completely off balance, and be friendly in your response, as in very simply to say, worst case scenario, you say, I don't accept this, or you simply say, okay, and you walk away. So the less you react to what they say, the more power you get back, the more you take from them, and the less they feel inclined to say or do anything towards you, because you have no reaction to what they're saying. So they rely on that reaction. That is where they get their power from. When escalation occurs or physical threats are present, you must inform a trusted source, please, whether this is a boss, a teacher, an older sibling, a parent, a friend, or anyone that you know that you can rely on. Keep a written record of everything that is said to you. Yeah. Report to authorities if necessary, especially if your well-being is affected. This is in very extreme cases, obviously, and this goes into physical bullying as well. In verbal bullying, extreme cases. Especially if your well-being is affected. This is not just physical well-being, but your ability to cope and continue with your normal day-to-day activities. So if you feel that you have drastically withdrawn from your life, that you don't feel like interacting with anyone now, that you're scared of social interactions, these are moments where it needs to be, or not necessarily taken to a professional, but to look into that as a possibility. Yeah, because this means that there's a big part of you that has been affected here, and we want to work on that potentially before it escalates. Now, because of my line of work and being a mental health advocate, I'm always about the inner game. What can we do within ourselves that can strengthen us, bring resilience? So let's go into this. How to enact change from within. Number one, know without doubt that you do not deserve this. Without doubt that you do not deserve this. And number two, know without doubt that you are worthy of happiness. And I want to add something else in there. You are worthy of happiness and respect. Very important. Know your worth. Know that this is not what you deserve, and know that you are worthy of happiness and respect. Now, this is something as simple as reminding yourself every day, using it as an affirmation, writing it down where you can see it, post-it notes, putting it on your wall. Remind yourself of what your worth is and what you deserve. Start with this. This is very small, but it's very powerful. How to enact change from within. It is important to note. Now, this is going back to why it's important to know that you do not deserve this. It is important to note that if you have been exposed to intolerable behavior for a while, you can become conditioned to think that things are your fault. This is social conditioning, and it can and often does happen. If you identify with this, the most important work you can do is that of rebuilding your self-esteem. Priority. Reinforcing your identity, knowing who you are, and knowing what triggers you. So what things can someone say to you that will trigger you? Maybe if someone says you're stupid, you turn around and go, that doesn't bother me, because you know you have that sense of self. You know that you're a very smart person. But then someone might say, you're terrible at playing sport. And that affects you because you love playing sport, or you get so much validation from playing sport. So it's always important to in these experiences, realize what your triggers actually are. Not everything that is said will hurt you. Some things will hurt more than others. Some things will hurt completely, while others won't hurt at all. And these triggers teach us about ourselves, because then we look at, well, where is this coming from? If this comes from I believe that I think that I'm stupid, and that's why when someone tells me you're stupid, I get so upset, I get so withdrawn, that really kills me inside. And that may be because when I was younger, when I was growing up, I felt potentially from siblings or from parents or from other family members that I was very stupid. So this belief has been running in your mind for years. So when someone tells you this, it makes you think. That's a trigger. So we look at it beyond that. So knowing your triggers empowers you, because then you know what's going to affect you and you can work on it so it doesn't affect you anymore. Reinforcing your identity. The more you know who you are, the less you let others affect you, because you know what you stand for and you know what you're worth. And the minute you know these things, nothing that anyone can say can ever affect you. Question your automated resources. and question your automated responses. Have the courage to continue questioning them. Your response is not you. So by resources and responses, I mean what is available to you and what you tend to respond. So in a bullying situation, if someone says something to you and you go quiet, or you put your head down, or you start to cry, or in your mind you start to think that, yeah, maybe that's actually true, question this and say, is that actually what I believe about myself? Don't accept what you first feel from the experience. Question your reactions and question the resources that you have around you. What you perceive to be around you may not actually be the case. So question everything in these experiences. Just because you have experienced something a certain way does not mean it's the right way. This is something to think about, yeah? In any experience in life, whether it is in love, in intelligence, in belief about relationships, in religion, in anything at all, if anybody ever were to come and make a comment to you that may hurt you or affect you, just know that just because you have experienced something a certain way does not mean it's the right way, okay? So just because someone tells you something does not mean that they know for certain or what their way is the right way. This goes back to questioning always. Question what people say to you. How to enact change from within. Again, know that your emotions are your greatest messengers. Respect them and feel them fully. Your emotions and your feelings must be felt, men and women alike. Remember your strengths and your achievements and validate yourself based upon all your positive and worthwhile attributes. Think about the best things that make you you. This empowers you and distinguishes you from others, because there's a sense of, I know who I am. I know what amazing experiences have made me who I am. And there's a sense of worth and empowerment in that space. So always remember your strengths and your achievements. It can be very easy to forget those things and think about things that we failed or we wish we'd done better. But it's important from day to day to remind yourself, go back in time, close your eyes, imagine, go back and think about moments where you've just felt so victorious and so awesome and so achieving and so brilliant, and immerse yourself in those experiences because they are a huge part of your identity. Focus on intense experiences such as travel, volunteer work, sports, performance, etc. Practice self-care. Coming from mental health advocate, again, this is very important. Journal. Beautiful tool. Meditate, learn breathing exercises, and engage in activities that give you the greatest joy. We teach a lot of these things at Illuminations. I work with a lot of these things in therapy, and these are great tools. You can find many resources online as well on how to do these things if you're just starting out. It's so effective to self-care. All right, last activity, knowing who you are. So for those, if you have a blank sheet of paper, this will work well, okay? I just want you to place your hand on the blank sheet of paper and draw the outline of your hand, okay? Write on each finger a special and unique attribute, quality, or talent that you have. Take your time and think about it. I'm going to give us all about 3-4 minutes, okay? After this workshop, share your drawing with your friends and see each other's defining qualities. Okay, I'll mention that in a bit. So for now, just on a piece of paper, draw the outline of your hand, and in each finger, so there should be 5, you write down a special or unique attribute, quality, or talent that you have, something that makes you special and unique. So I'll give everybody 3 to 4 minutes and we'll move ahead. Okay. So just as there are so many things that make you unique in this world, so we must always respect the differences of others and know that our greatest value to humanity lives in who we are. It is in who we are and what we offer that makes us special to this world. And both are very important, but ultimately, who you are as a person, as a human, in the roles that you play in your life is what brings a sense of uniqueness to you and to your existence. And knowing that nobody can ever be you, nobody will ever be you for as long as humanity continues. And there's such a beauty and such a significance in that awareness. So a bit of a wrap up for your own personal reflection. If you'd like, if you have your phones on you, please feel free to take a picture of these questions. I think it would be best if maybe you answer them, take your time and answer them after the workshop. Since we are running a little over time, please do take these questions and just have a think about them. If you can write the answers to them, it will be really helpful for you to take as much from this workshop as you have. So yeah, I'll give you a few moments. If anybody wants to take a photo or write down some of the questions that they'd like to think about later on, please feel free. Some of these questions are, what did you learn about the topic of bullying today? Can you think of times in your life where you or someone you know was bullied? How do you think being bullied makes people feel? If you or someone that you know is being bullied, what are some of the things they can do for help or to stop the bullying? If someone starts bullying you, who would you talk to about the situation? Who are some of the people that would help you? What does it mean to be a bystander? How can you go from being a bystander to someone who can actively help the situation? And now that you know a little more about bullying, what do you think you can do to make a difference at school, university, or your workplace, or wherever you are currently in a social setting? What are some of the new ways that you could help someone who was being bullied? Now, these are some online resources where it goes a little deeper into different techniques that you can use if you or anyone you know has ever experienced bullying. Goes a little deeper into the types of bullying and just in general gives you more resources, more of an understanding. So please feel free to take a picture of the slide or to note down some of these websites. All very excellent websites. I've visited them all. I love them all. They're very special to me, so that's why I'm sharing them with you. Okay. Lastly, favorite quote. We all know this one, that we must be the change that we wish to see in the world. It always starts with us. So thank you so much, everybody, for your presence here today. I hope that this workshop has been of value to you. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's taught you something that maybe you didn't know. And or if it's everything that you've known, I hope it's just reiterated and it's helped affirm what you do know. So from the bottom of my heart, again, thank you so much for being here. I hope that we are all on this same journey and same aspiration to end bullying once and for all. And just as a quick note from your school, that if any of you are in a position where you are experiencing bullying, either yourself or someone that you know, please utilize your student affairs department, okay? They are there to help you. Or of course, you can speak to Mona or to Afra or to Betul. Okay. So now is the opportunity. I shall stop sharing the screen. I know that it's gone a little over time, so I understand if some of you have to leave. So all my graciousness and gratitude to those who have stayed till the end. And of course, to those who came, even if they had to leave early, thank you. If anyone has any questions now, feel free to ask. If you're able to stay on a little later and you want to discuss or have any questions, I'm here. Otherwise, yeah, I'll be here for about 5-10 minutes if anyone has any thoughts, questions, concerns. I'll also check the chat, actually. Thank you so much for the beautiful comments. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. If anybody would like to reach out to me personally, please note you can find my details through Illuminations. And I also, of course, do office sessions and workshops. But yes, if there's any concern, you can also ask me in private if you wish. You can private message me. That's fine too.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for your this fantastic and useful, fruitful workshop. And thank you, Pia and Batul, for making this smoother organization of this event. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Please, we'll share with you now the survey for the event, for the workshop. Please take 2 minutes to fill it, please. Batul will share it with you now.
Yes, I will share it actually, but the number of participants is now decreasing. So I'll be sharing the link here on the chat, and I'll be sharing by email.
Sorry,
So
1 second. Sorry, lady, sorry to interrupt. I think someone had a question. Is this Aisha? You mentioned, I don't think you can hear me, but I have a question. You mentioned that we have to reach out to someone if we notice a bully, but in a lot of situations, the bully refuses to share it with someone. Okay, Aisha, are you able to come on to speak, or you can only type? So I'm not quite sure of your question, love. If you mean that you mentioned we have to reach to someone if we notice a bully. So in a situation, if you are aware that someone is being bullied, or if a bully is approaching you, again, utilizing just a situation or a scenario that may happen, the idea is that you reach out if at some point it becomes threatening to your well-being, if at some point you feel that you're not necessarily that your life is in danger, but you know that you feel attacked, or you feel like I need to find support, or I need to have someone as support with me at this particular time. So I'm not quite sure though if that answers your question. It's more about that when you feel you need the resource, please reach out, and please find someone that you trust always. But if that's not your question, please feel free to correct me. I'm not quite sure if I've answered that.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. And they can all reach out to us in the success and well-being
Please,
department.
yes.
We are there for them. They can share their concerns by email or pass by our offices. Perfect. Or even email us. It will be 100% private and confidential, so no.
Okay, so sorry, 1 second, I think she's just responded. I mean that sometimes if I notice someone being bullied, they usually refuse to let us share the situation with someone else. Okay, so you're talking that if you notice that someone is being bullied and they usually refuse to share the situation, so they're not sharing it with somebody else, right? They're keeping it to themselves. Okay, so this was sort of what I mentioned in the webinar about looking for signs, right? So sometimes, yes, in many cases, the person who is the recipient of the bullying, or the person is on receiving end, potentially because of a threat, they may feel like they can't share it with others, or they feel scared to share. So it is about having that awareness, looking for people who are withdrawing, looking for people who look sadder or act in a way that's not their usual self. So being observant to those around you and seeing if there's a difference in their behavior, you can always take them aside and say, is anything going on? You don't, of course, have to ask them in an open setting, because if the person who is bullying them is around, they're not going to answer, right? But to take them aside and say, is anything going on? Can I help you with anything? Know that I'm here if you want to talk. So we can't force people to open up, but we can show them that there is a safety net, that they have a safe space always, and that they're not in danger for being open about what's happening to them. So we offer that, and we remind them that they're safe, and that we remind them that they have that support, but ultimately, and we of course hope that they will utilize those resources and open up. But of course, sometimes it can be difficult to see. So that's why it's important to try and notice if you see that people that you would normally, that you would know that they normally act in a certain way, if they start to act differently, it's never an issue or a problem to take someone aside and say, hey, just checking, is everything okay? You've seemed a bit down lately, a little bit concerned about something I saw yesterday. I'm just checking, is everything all right? People, even if there's nothing wrong, and maybe it's just something that has happened in their family life, but there's no particular issue, people always appreciate you reaching out and asking if you're okay. So I hope that helps. Exactly, gaining their trust. Beautiful.
Okay,
sorry
Jessica,
to interrupt, ladies.
I'll be sharing with you all the list of participants for you to prepare the certificates. I'm working on this now. I shared the link for the survey in the chat, and I'll be sending it by email. Hopefully, I'll contact you by tomorrow with all the participants' names for certificates.
Please do. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. So I think that's it then for questions. Take care. Have a lovely evening. I've taken up enough of your time. Thank you again for participating and being here today, and have a lovely week ahead, and all blessings to all of you. Thank you again so much. And thank you to the
Jessica.
school for
Thank you all.
organizing.
Thank
Take
you.
care,
Thank you, all
everyone.
of you. Have a
Good
good
night.
night.